just received a letter.
All right, Sam, let's jump straight into it. How's your experience with? Were you satisfied with the finale of the bantamweight title?
Was I satisfied? Yeah, I think I was.
You feel that was the final chapter, and you're happy with that?
I feel like case is closed, yeah.
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 And how did you find that fight? What were you going through that? I mean, when the fifth round, heading into the fifth round, how did you score it?
I personally had Nkosi up. I can't remember exactly how. I think it was maybe 3-1. I think I had it. But I also said to the guys in the office when I was watching it, this could also be 2-2.
Going into the last round?
Going into the last round, I personally thought, under my observation, in line with the sort of new age MMA rules, that Nkosi was 3-1 up. But there was an argument for 2-2.
So what is a new age MMA rule? I mean, we've been hearing that a lot, and people talk about it, where damage is important. I think that's one of the biggest priorities, right?
Yes.
Damage is a priority. Who's more dominant in positions, who's more aggressive, who's got the center of the cage.
Yeah.
I think all of that factors, I mean, ultimately, you have to judge the fight. And I think when we're looking at damage as a priority, it's a good thing because it also adds a lot of value to defense.
Yes.
You know, because you could have fighters throwing so much more strikes.
But if they don't land, they're not causing damage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the first fight, I think the second fight was very clear, right? It was a referee stoppage for the cut. But the first fight and the third fight, for me, I'm looking at both these fights and I'm like, it's always going to be a difficult decision to decide who won the first fight. You saw that same kind of discussions happening even after the third fight.
Yeah.
A lot of people making different cases. I think regardless of where the fight is happening, we mentioned that multiple times that we had 3 events, 3 fights between them, and all the 3 fights happened in 3 different countries, 3 different continents. But it didn't matter where the fight takes place. It's always going to be very difficult for the judges to actually score this fight, regardless of which country or where the fight is taking place. And the only way you can actually have, for me, I'm watching the fights and I'm like, the only way we can have a final decision on this, you know, without any arguments or questions, is if it is a finish.
Yes.
And that's always going to be the case. I think
that's all that fight lacked.
Yeah, and I think if you make that fight happen another 5 times, the only way, as long as it goes to the decision, it's always going to be a difficult one to decide. But yes, I think Shorty should have taken that fight with the mentality. And I know that he mentioned that he wanted to go out there and finish. I think every fighter would love to have a finish and not go through the whole 5 rounds. But I don't know if he really pushed that hard to try and finish the fight.
I don't think he was allowed to.
Yeah.
I don't think it was a case of he didn't push hard enough. I think Nkosi was good enough to not allow him to. He was very smart. It wasn't the most tenacious performance from Nkosi. It wasn't the performance I was expecting from Nkosi. I was expecting more like the second, a build upon the second. And he almost did get the job done in the second round. But I didn't find him as tenacious as I probably thought he was going to be and wanted him to be. I think he showed that he is deservedly the champion. He is a world-class fighter, and he's proved it over these 3 fights. But he wasn't as tenacious as I'd like him to have been. Now, is that a credit to Shorty and what Shorty was doing in there? I'm not sure. Only Nkosi knows. But I just didn't quite have he looked very effective in striking. It was just, I don't think Nkosi was pushing it as much as he could have.
Yeah.
Not Shorty, Nkosi.
Right. And I think that was a smart decision from Nkosi. I think when you look at the third fight, you could actually see the education that they've had on each other
Yes.
from the first and second fight. So if you look at the first fight, one of the bigger challenges was you're actually looking at Nkosi going forward,
Yeah.
attacking, throwing punches, getting into those clinch positions, Muay Thai clinch positions, trying to throw those knees.
But at the same time, having too much respect for
Sure.
Shorty, because that was one of the things in the first fight. Yes, he was pushing it forward, but I think it was a bit stars in his eyes, so to speak. Oh, this is Shorty Torres, you know. That's what I felt like in the first.
And for me, I felt I don't know about that about the respect part, because I felt like he understood Shorty and respected him more in the third fight,
Yeah,
and in a good way.
from a different perspective, though.
Intelligence, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
when you respect someone, is you know his strengths and you know what he's capable
Yeah.
of. I think the first fight he thought that he could go out there and throw those punches, get those knees, Muay Thai clinch knees, control him. I'm going to be stronger, and I think that didn't work out really well for him, because you tried to outpower Shorty, who's shorter than you, and coming up from a lower weight class, and you felt like I could have that cage control, I could control him there, and I could work him around and win those rounds. But that was not the case. Shorty was really smart and relaxed at what his position was. He was doing those judo throws, countering his Muay Thai clinches, countering his front kicks. So I think from there, he came back and he learned. And I think the second fight was very, very good for Nkosi, because he did the same, very similar to what he was doing in the third fight as well, where he understood that my reach is my biggest strength.
Yeah.
And I don't have to go in and help him close the distance. And I think Shorty mentioned that too a lot of times,
Yeah.
where he was like, this is what he's going to do. He's going to want to come and attack me and clinch with me, and that's going to be a good position for me to be in.
Yeah.
It's not a bad position to be in. And
Yeah,
now he gave him a position where it is the worst nightmare
Yes.
for a guy who cannot close that distance, to have to close that distance.
Yeah.
And Shorty was the whole fight working every single round trying to close that distance.
Yeah.
And on the good side, when you look at Shorty, he realized that, hold on, I don't have to wait for things to play out, and I'm going to get those positions. I don't have time for that. And he realized that if I do that, I'm going to end up just taking those jabs and punches
Yeah.
all day long and end up getting a cut or anything else. So he did become a little more aggressive. You see him making those leaps into closing the distance with those punches.
And he used the leg kicks a lot to close the distance.
Oh, yes.
Very
Yeah.
well. I thought Shorty's leg kicking was very effective, actually.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's a few things that I thought that he should have done earlier in the round than later in the round.
Typical Shorty.
Yeah, and I saw that body shots that he was landing, and the low kicks, like you said, was very effective. But he didn't start with that in the first round.
No.
And that's why I think there's the second round was definitely the round. I don't think anybody has any question. You had, Nkosi had Shorty dropped. And I think it was all Nkosi that round, and he was enjoying it. You saw him throwing the spinning back kicks. Like, I think Phil was commenting, and he was saying that he threw everything at him, including the kitchen sink. He literally did throw everything.
And I think that was a turning point in the fight. I think he realised, I've just thrown everything at him. I couldn't finish him. I need to be smart now.
Yeah,
I need to take my foot off the gas a bit now, not try to finish him, and just get this win.
right.
That's what it felt like to me. Because he wasn't throwing shots with the same tenacity. He wasn't, the snap on the punches he had in the first two rounds wasn't there, particularly in the fifth. He seemed to fade a bit, but I think that was just to win the fight.
Yeah.
Almost like a Floyd Mayweather kind of tactic.
Sure.
That's what it felt like to me.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I think you have to. I think coming out of this fight, Nkosi is going to be so much more wiser as a fighter.
100%, yeah.
Because you just realize that this is what it takes to be at the top level, fighting the best in the world, and to be a champion, you have to grind those wins.
Yeah.
At the same time, like you said, I think he looked like a Floyd Mayweather type fighter, trying to get those wins and getting those damages and making sure that, listen, I don't have to do anything more than I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And let him work and try to get and close those distance. But that second round was so important. Whether it was a 10-9 round, 10-8 round, I gave it a 10-9 to Nkosi.
So did I.
That knockdown was there. But what was really impressive was the way Shorty recovered. And I don't think I really want to know from him how much of a damage did he really feel from that,
Yeah.
But the way he recovered in that round, I'm not talking about the round after, even if you look at that round, he got back up, and the amount of strikes he was eating from elbows to
Yeah.
knees to God knows what, like there's nothing that
Even
Nkosi didn't
to
throw.
even to recover from that knee that dropped him,
Yeah.
it was humongous.
And the amount of strikes that landed after that,
Yeah.
the amount of elbows that landed, the amount of there was knees landed, elbows landed, straight punches landed. There's everything that was landing. There was a spinning back kick to the body. Like everything was happening at that time. But the way Shorty recovered from that drop was unbelievable. And you look at the round after that, you would never look at the third round and say that the previous round he was knocked down.
Well, he won that round though.
On third round, he won it. Yeah,
He came back and won a
for
round.
me, yeah, I
after.
think the third round he definitely won that round.
Yeah.
I think that was something that would have been, like you said, the adjusting process for Nkosi after that second round, realizing it, thinking that, hey, hold on.
Let's be smart now.
Yeah, that'd be smart.
Yeah.
And let's get back to the momentum of what I want to do. And I think Shorty really took advantage of that. He knew that coming back in, he's going to be expected to play smart. But then he's like, no, I'm not going to play smart. I'm just going to go in and get that round, on my side. So I think the second round was definitely Nkosi's. The first round for me was the closest round, in the sense that it was a round where a lot of decisions was made regarding who could win that fight. And I think a lot of people gave that round to Nkosi.
I did.
And I would have given that round to Nkosi as well. But I understand the case of if it swayed to the people that were saying that Shorty won that round. I do understand how they thought about it. But again, the compared to the damage and the strikes that he was landing, I think that was...
I just thought. I think the first round is a bit of a theme for the whole fight, really, where there was a lot of activity. It was incredibly close, but the most effective fighter in that round and the whole fight was Nkosi. He did just enough. Yes, Shorty was taking him down and managed to secure takedowns and was pushing the pace of the fight, was mainly in the centre of the octagon, but centre of the cage, sorry. But Nkosi was effective. Every time there was a takedown, he managed to stand up, or he managed to counter wrestle. And every time that Shorty would press forward, he would circle out or take a step back, or like he was almost letting Shorty have the cage in order to play his game, So I just felt the most effective fighter was Nkosi in the first round, which sort of was the theme of the fight.
Yeah, definitely. I think it depends on. See, if you look at the whole fight, definitely there was a lot of offense from Nkosi, and if you look at how many punches or strikes were thrown by Nkosi, I think there won't be a comparison of the strikes that were thrown. I still feel like there's a lot of people and I spoke about this in the first fight as well. A lot of people misjudge Shorty's defense, and it's a lot to do with not getting the hit. It's not about he's missing the punches, and you saw that a little bit in third round or fourth round as well. Shorty doing a little bit more of head movement and missing those punches, but at the same time, whether it's the front kick or whether it's the knee stomps or whether it's the punches that he was throwing, the jabs, most of them, a lot of people don't realize how many of them actually landed and how many of them were actually parried by Nkosi, and how many of them actually landed on Nkosi's arms. And that's something I feel like it's hard to notice in this fight. And when you're looking at that, that's where everything changes. The mindset changes of how you judge is when you look and say that, okay, you know what? More strikes thrown by Nkosi. The whole fight, most of the times, Shorty is more aggressive. He's the one taking the fight forward. He's going for those punches. He's getting in the cage. He's going for those takedown. He's mixing things up. He's making his opponent work. His opponent is moving around and throwing those jabs and straights and all sorts of strikes, which is in quantity. There's a huge volume of strikes that are being thrown. How much of them are actually landing on Shorty, and how, when you look at the overall round itself, how much of that Shorty was aggressive and trying to be in a position where it's more comfortable for Shorty and dictate the fight in that positions, But I feel like the takedowns were not very effective, like you said, because he couldn't take advantage of it. There was one round, I think it was the third round, where he got his back, not exactly with the hooks in, but he had one arm around his neck.
But Nkosi gave him that position. It was like flashbacks to the first fight. He got in the position where he went on Shorty Airlines a few times, and he sort of sunk down, and that's where he managed to get the neck.
Yeah.
So that was, I thought that was a bit of a mistake on Nkosi's part there.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think, but at the same time, the way he defended those,
Amazing. Yeah. What a difference.
Yeah. So, see, it was third and fourth round. I mean, fourth round was another difficult round to judge. You know, fifth round, I gave it to Shorty for sure. I felt like Shorty got that round.
He was the more busy fighter.
More busier fighter. I think that Nkosi's punches were not as effective as the earlier rounds. I think the best round, second round, keep that aside. That's completely an Nkosi round. That was Nkosi's best round. But apart from the first round, if you're looking at the other 4 rounds, I think the best striking game Nkosi put on in a round was the first one.
Yeah.
And it looked more effective, more stronger, more quicker. And you actually felt like those were significant strikes. Third round, fourth round, fifth round, especially the fifth round, you didn't see that much. Fourth round, he came back. He knew it was a championship round. He got that motivation from his team as well. He came in and knew that this is where you're expecting me to go down. This is where you're expecting me to be tired and not being able to handle those deep waters.
Yeah.
And he came with, you could see that motivation in him,
Yeah.
that toughness and the mentality that he came out and he's like, you know what, I'm going to go. I'm going to be aggressive. I'm going to try and take this fight to Shorty and make it an actual fight.
It was almost, this is where I become the champion.
Yeah.
This is where, because this is a test for me now.
Yeah.
This is where I'm going to prove to you I can grind it out and be the champion.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why for me, the fourth round and the first round. So first round was, yes, I would in a way agree with you that those strikes did make a difference. But fourth round was maybe the closest round in that sense to make that decision. And it would have moved more harder to move to Shorty or Nkosi. Fifth round, it was easier to move it, move to the Shorty side. If somebody gave it to Shorty, I would be like, yeah, I wouldn't argue with that so much. But the fourth round was really, really very close. But in any case, I think Shorty should have not left it in the judges' hands. There was the only way to do that was finish that fight. And Nkosi, on the other hand, didn't have to finish the fight.
He didn't. He did enough. Do you know what really, really impressed me? It was in the first fight, the clinch played a massive part of the fight, where Nkosi was engaging in the clinch, but he often didn't come out better because Shorty was more experienced and used. That's where the Shorty Airlines came in. But over the 3 fights, you've seen how much Nkosi's learned. And he was actually using the clinch, but not in an offensive way, in breaking away. Every time they broke away, there'd be an elbow or a knee or something. So it was almost like he was welcoming the clinch on and then using it to his advantage. Do you know what I mean? Rather than being aggressive in the clinch, he was countering the clinch, which I thought was really effective. Yeah. It shows how much he's progressed over the over the 3 fights.
No, absolutely. I think the difference in the fight IQ of Nkosi in the third fight, you have to give credit to his team as well. I mean, I think they've really, really studied and thought about what could come in and what could Shorty come into the fight with. I mean, what Shorty brings in, but how is he dealing with this fight? How is he going to sit back and learn Nkosi? And what is he going to come to counter those tactics of Nkosi? And then they switched from a countering the counter kind of a strategy. So I think that was very smart. But it's very evident the biggest challenge for Shorty to win that fight or not win that fight was always about the distance. And Nkosi fighting backwards, moving around, the movement he had, his footwork was fantastic.
Fantastic.
I think that really showed that that's how I'm going to win this fight. I have a complete advantage over Shorty. I'm going to keep throwing this jab. I could do this all day long. And those stomps that he started with in the beginning, I think that first round, he created a story around what's going to happen.
Those oblique kicks, wasn't it?
Oblique kicks, but on the knees, he was doing those knee stomps. And he was really trying to, trying to kick that knee and dislocate those knees, you know?
He was.
So
vicious.
And that was very important for to make Shorty think that, okay, if I need to close this distance, I got to expect multiple things. I have those. It's just not looking at those straight punches that I have to deal with. There's going to be kicks coming in. If I close a distance, I think you mentioned that before the fight as well, that when he's going to be closing that distance, he has to deal with those elbows coming in and break that barrier and make sure that it's not just the straight punches. Once I reach past the straight punches, I have to worry about the elbows. And he gave him everything. Like, and Kosi made sure that in the first round, that yes, you're going to deal with all of this. You're going to deal with the elbows, you're going to deal with the front kicks, you're going to deal with the knee stomps. So you have to think twice before you try and snap and get into closing the distance. And I think you see that throughout the fight. At some point, you see Shorty waking up and saying that, you know what, I don't care. I have to
Yeah.
go for those takedowns. I have to close those distance. But at some point, you'll see him thinking so much more of how do I break this machine of offenses that's coming from all different directions, all different types of offenses. There was positions where Nkosi was staying in that almost like a Philly shell position, but almost scaring him to throw an upper elbow.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's crazy.
It was crazy. It was crazy. I think the biggest takeaway for me, well, not the biggest takeaway, but a takeaway from this fight is that I think a lot of this fight comes down to physical attributes. I think if Shorty was a couple of inches taller and had a couple of inches more reach, it'd be a very different fight. I just think it showed to me that he needs to go back down to the flyweight division.
Absolutely. Now, we discussed about this, and I was telling you the thing about Shorty would have a much better fight with a lot of other bantamweights in the division, and then Kosi would have worse of a fight with a lot of other bantamweights in the division. It's just one of those fights that it is those
styles make fights.
Yeah, styles makes fights, and I think that style is going to be, and it even shows the toughness of Shorty and the intelligence of Nkosi of growing and learning as well. So it's a perfect combination, and you're right. I think for Shorty going back to the flyweight division, and it's not our place to tell a fighter what
Absolutely
to do.
not. Absolutely not.
But I'm with you on that part. That I think Shorty at flyweight division is unstoppable. I think he's
100%.
got everything that he needs to be at the weight class. I mean, you're talking about today the best bantamweight in the world, and that's the world champion Nkosi. And he's put on 2 fights with him that was very close, that everybody can talk about which way can it go, And that itself shows how good Shorty is.
And I think one of the biggest advantages that Nkosi had was his physical attributes. He was that much bigger, and he used that so well. I just don't think that. I think that Shorty is physically where he's at is better down at flyweight, and I truly believe that Shorty Torres is one of, if not the best flyweight in the world.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question about it. For him to go out, be at bantamweight, and put on a show like this. And I still believe that, I'm not saying that he wouldn't be successful at bantamweight division. He still could be successful at bantamweight division. He could still come back and do it, but it's.
But I want to see him maximize. I want to see him be the best he possibly can be, and I believe that's
evident that at flyweight, yes, 100% like this, he could be the best as he was.
Yeah,
as he was, and how dominant he was in that weight division. I think he should go back to that division if there is room for making that happen. I think at the end of the day, we discussed that with him. It's about how he feels.
Yeah.
How he feels, where he has more happiness fighting, which weight class does he prefer fighting, and that it's a difficult process to go and to cut that weight, dedicate your and you saw that.
And he's a bit older now. He's later on in his career, so maybe that is part of the decision.
Absolutely, but at 31, for me, I really believe that Nkosi is nowhere near Shorty. Yes, yeah. He's definitely in his peak right now.
In his prime,
in his prime, absolutely. I think there is the age factor is not yet at the position where it's going to affect him, but I think he feels like, and we discuss this again, it's the amount of fights he had, the amount of history and legacy that is built. He almost have done what a 40-year-old MMA fighter would have achieved in his career. Is what Shorty has achieved, in such a short time. And I think that he needs to look forward and say that, what, I have good 4 to 5 years ahead of me where I could rebuild that legacy and achieve so much more in the next 2 to 3 years, So, and I think flyweight is going to be that door open for him to achieve that.
I believe so too. I believe so too.
And definitely, I think he's going to go back, and it was a very close fight. Nkosi is the undisputed bantamweight world champion. So the question is, Shorty has the mentality that is that what's going to motivate him to go back into the bantamweight, fight in the bantamweight division. clear up few of the guys that's in the contendership and come back and fight Nkosi? Is that the motivation that you need to dedicate the lifestyle that he's done for this one fight? I mean, it's clearly mentioned that he's never had this kind of dedication before when it comes to completely having a team dedicated only for Shorty, for that fight. So if
I'd
he's going to
say
continue that,
keep that momentum
absolutely.
and keep that to get you down to the other weight class and become the king of that weight class. And then who knows, maybe you could look at a double champ status later on.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think the road back to legacy is at 125.
You have the case study, it's proven, and he's done it, So I think it is something that you have to. Once you've done something, you've achieved something. I mean, why wouldn't you continue doing that? And yes, he was clear about it. It's purely because of the weight cut and the lifestyle that he has to go through to get each fight in his books, and that's why he was enjoying bantamweight. But I think that after this fight, he might think differently, and I look forward to really, let him get this time off and then come back and tell us where he's at. And I think that conversation will be a very interesting conversation between you and Shadi to hear what's his plan for the future, especially this year. It's a big year for him. He started with a big fight, but definitely there's the fan base that he's built in South America. I think with Brave going back to South America, there's definitely going to be a discussion of the fans in Colombia wanting Shorty to be in that card for sure.
We've had a few conversations and just say, watch this space. Watch this space.
What was the conversation about?
With Shorty. What's next?
I was not aware of it. What did you talk to Shorty?
We had a little conversation about what's next.
Yeah.
I won't release it now, but there's some big things in there.
What was it about?
His next fight.
Oh yeah.
Oh, you do want me to release it?
Oh no, I don't know what is it about.
Yeah, it's about his next fight and where it's going to be and what.
Which weight class would we be fighting?
He wants one more at bantamweight and then go to flyweight.
Oh, he said that.
Mm.
That's interesting. And that's the right decision to make. See, while he fights in the bantamweight and move to flyweight, we have to talk about the upcoming event. I think Brave in Mauritius. I think it was a fantastic event, great for Africa, and I remember putting the belt on Nkosi's shoulders, and it means so much for us as an organization as well, and for what we're trying to do for mixed martial art. When you hear the best moment of a fighter is when he wins one of the toughest fights of his career, the biggest fight of his career, the biggest fight of the organization's history, all those significance, massive milestones associated with that fight, and he wins it, he becomes a champion in his continent, and the first words he tells me when I put the belt on is that thank you for bringing the event to Africa and giving opportunity to the African fighters in this card, and becoming a future platform for African mixed martial art. And that just gives you a real idea about what a champion is. It's just not about going out there and winning fights. It's the mentality that you have of what you represent. And I mean, for me, that's a true champion inside and outside of the cage, to have that
100%.
as your first thought.
And since then, he's gone on to be in terrestrial TV, the morning news show with his belt. That fight for Africa was huge.
Oh yeah,
and for him, and to what an achievement to go and be on terrestrial. I can't even say it. Terrestrial TV.
Yeah,
A morning breakfast show. Sat there with your belt and your pendant as the champion of Africa, or the champion of the world from Africa in Africa.
absolutely.
Awesome.
Oh yeah, the feedback that we've got. We've mentioned that. I mean, the viewership numbers on our OTT platform, Brave TV, it was the highest viewed event in
Was
our
it really?
history. Yeah, and at the same time, if you see the lineup of the broadcast television and their interest in broadcasting this event and being associated with this event, it really shows how important it was for Nkosi to be fighting in Africa for the title. And that was, for me, it was amazing because, and for him to realize that, this event in Mauritius, him fighting for the title, everything was a door opening towards something that is much more bigger in terms of opportunity for African fighters. Of course, one of the biggest regret, or I would say what I think a lot of fans were um, sad about, was missing Kubanza fighting in that card. You know,
No one was as sad as I am, believe me.
yeah, I think that, and you could actually see that reaction from the fans, whether it was on the social platforms, everywhere else. There was a lot of people that was really upset that Kubanza couldn't fight. But at the same time, we discussed that as well, that bringing those athletes from DRC to be able to showcase themselves on a global platform, I think they realize, like in Kosi and Kubanza, they realize that the importance of this and importance of themselves as pioneers for making this happen. And the way forward is not just about winning fights, which is crucial. The most important thing in the sport is you gotta win, and you gotta keep winning. But at the same time, there's so much more to do in Africa. And I think together with these quality fighters and fighters that think with this mindset, like I was mentioning, what I was getting to was that when you have that kind of mindset for a champion from Africa, not just that he's a great fighter, but with that mindset, I think for us as Brave, we're blessed to have a champion like Nkosi in our roster, and that's gonna make it so much more easier for our efforts in what we're doing in Africa. And that's the quality of fighters you need, which in our roster at least, to make sure that they are thinking bigger than just the organization or the fighters. We're thinking of the community and the responsibilities that we have, and that is so important. So, but at the same time, we're talking about bantamweight division, and Kosi is a champion. You feel that the chapter is over for now until the next time, but for now the chapter is over, and we had a massive bantamweight fight in the same card with Huende winning the fight against Nazarov, which I thought was a fantastic performance. And I think that just adds a lot more depth and storyline to the bantamweight division. I think the bantamweight division is getting really, really crazy. But talking about the bantamweight division, like I said, we have to go to 83 and talk about Brave 83. And when you look at the bantamweight division, I'm excited to have Idrisov come back and fight in Brave and add another wealth of quality into the bantamweight division. And I think a lot of people who don't know Idrisov, him being in the bantamweight division, and you're looking at the bantamweight division now with the likes of Hamza, Izzuddin, Veli Murad, Shorty Torres, and Kosi Huendes, and you having guys like Idrisov come into that bantamweight division and have a fight like that. I think that fight is just coming back off this Mauritius bantamweight story. I think that's going to add a lot of interest into the division of what's going to happen. So again, we spoke about the transition from amateur to professional, and Idrisov, very similar to that. He's come from those backgrounds, so
He was an IMF world champion, right?
He was 2019, I think, European champion.
European champion.
European gold medalist, but he was 2018 world silver medalist as well.
Okay.
So he's been there in the IMF world at the top level, but getting into the professional world, he's done something completely different.
Well, he went on an 8-fight win streak.
Yeah.
8-fight undefeated win streak, yeah.
Absolutely.
And then had that unbelievable fight with Bidzina.
Yes. Oh, what a fight. Oof. And I think that's where Bidzina got that, eyeballs of everybody in the Brave Nation.
Gotcha.
And a lot to give credit to Idrisov as well. So you know how good Idrisov is and how much people rate the quality of Idrisov for having a fight that close with Bidzina, and Bidzina taking that fight puts Bidzina already at the top of the food chain.
100%.
You don't end up taking a fight against Idrisov and having a fight, and you're looking at a guy whose grappling is phenomenal in Idrisov, right? And to deal with that I think that's was for me very impressive from Bidzina at that time. But I think Idrisov is coming back to prove a point at this stage, and with all that skills of grappling, all that accolades of amateur mixed martial art. It's also interesting matchup because he's fighting against a lot of fighters you'll see in this roster from the last one, this one, that is targeting our France event, and it has a lot to do with our France event. And when you're looking at this card in Netherlands, you won't miss out the name of Alex Lahore or Picard. And when you made this matchup, were you really looking at that high quality striker in Picard to come and fight against a guy whose grappling is so good? Was that the mentality? Was it grappler, was a striker, traditional style of?
There was a bit of that, but I was also intrigued by the matchup because Picard, because Idrisov is coming up to bantamweight from flyweight, and Picard is a guy that sort of is an in-betweener. He floats between featherweight and also bantamweight, so he's going to be a bit bigger. So it's a bit of a test for Idrisov in the sense of that, yes, he's fighting a good striker, but also this guy can also fight in the weight division above, which is 2 weight divisions above Idrisov, where he used to fight. So
Sure.
I wanted to see how he'd get on against a sort of bigger guy. Because if you are coming up to the division, you are going to face somebody like a Nkosi, who's massive for the division. Let's see how you get on with someone that can float between 2 heavier weight divisions, you know?
Yeah, and I think that fight for the bantamweight division. I think when you're looking at the likes of, if you're looking at Huendes and William Lutz, all of them watching what's going to happen next, because that's the biggest question: what's happening next in the bantamweight division? When you're looking at that, this fight, I think, is going to have the division's attention because I don't think, Idrisov is coming and fighting an opponent who he can deal with from his grappling skills alone. I mean, you're looking at a person who's Sanda champion, who's been kickboxing champion, and at the same time, if I'm not mistaken, he must be a judo black belt as well. So correct me if I'm wrong on that. Is he? Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. And
Karate and judo.
judo black belt. So when you're looking at that, definitely he knows the strategies, and he knows he's not far away from the grappling world when you're a judo black belt.
No,
You
God,
know,
no.
and I think that,
It's also going to be a different look for Idrisov.
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And you have to you have to be good at making sure that when you have a striker with all those accolades behind him from the kickboxing world or the Sanda world, all that together, and you have a judo black belt, you know that your biggest value you're going to bring in the fight is going to be a submission game. And Idrisov has to make sure that whether he's a judo expert, whatever it is, when I'm on the ground, it's not just grappling with the opponent. I have to try and take the advantage of submissions. And I think that's where we have to see if Idrisov is a guy that can go out there and finish fights with submissions, because I think that is where his biggest strength is in this fight. But at the same time, I think Picard, I've heard somewhere where he mentioned that his first martial art that he started training was actually wrestling. So you come from the idea of understanding wrestling, become a judo black belt, and then you have all these national championships and wins in the kickboxing world, in the Sanda world, the striking world. And of course, at the same time, he's not a person who's just starting in to fight MMA yesterday. You know,
He's got a lot of experience.
15-9.
Yeah,
So
24 fights. That's like more than double what Idrisov
yeah.
has got.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Maybe not with IMAF, but still at the professional level.
I don't know how many fights he had at the amateur level, Idrisov, really.
Fair few at IMAF.
Yeah.
But even so, I don't think his pro and his combined is as much as Bryce's professional experience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But at the same time, it's also about, when you say professional experience, I think that a lot of people don't give credit to that. You know, I think the professional experience is very important because the amount of work that is going to be put in for a longer period of time for one opponent, it's very important. And then to look at everything around you, it's not a sporting decision alone. It's also a business decision that you take when you fight professionally, when you take an opponent, when you fight an opponent. You're looking, at some stage, you're looking at 3-4 fights ahead. You're studying the whole weight division. There's so much of business decision to be made. And when you look at a guy like Picard, I think this guy is a very active fighter. I mean, you can have experience of fighting professional level, but when you have 11 fights in 2 years, you know, that's a lot of experience of fighting at a professional level in such a short time. And
That's more he's had in his whole career. It's more
Right.
that Idrisov has had in his whole career.
yeah, exactly. So he's fought 11 times in 2 years. And yes, exactly. That's way more than, that's more than his complete pro career. But I think that adds a lot of importance. We've seen that when you see Nazarov in the last fight, young combat sambo world champion, everything is there where you look at it, and a lot of people thought that Nazarov will easily win that fight with his grappling skills, but it looked very different when he fought Huende, and I think that was not a lot to do. I won't take any credit away from Huende and his game plan, how good he was in his grappling, but
Apparently, they can wrestle in Africa.
yes, yes, definitely. No, true. But I wouldn't take anything away from how good Huende was. He looked fantastic. But at the same time, there is a case to be made about the ring rust. I mean, not in this, and I don't like to use the word ring rust. It's more of being out of touch with that consistent pressure of upcoming fights and what's happening with the roster and what's next for me. You know what I
Being
mean?
under the lights, the interviews, the pressures that come with fight week, 100%.
Yeah, so I think that is an important factor, and I think this bantamweight fight is going to be one of those fights that's key to the division of what's happening next. Everybody wants to know what's happening next, and I think that we should be looking at having that conversation of what's next. And maybe in the next podcast, we should be revealing what's going to happen in the bantamweight division. And I think this fight is going to be one of the big decision makers of what are the next fights to be made in that weight class. But talking about France, getting into France, I think the major signing of Alex Lahore and being in the main event of Brave CF 83 in Netherlands against Marcin Bendel, and to be introduced to Brave Combat Federation in the main event in Netherlands against the former champion, that's a big statement.
Yeah.
What do you think? A lot of people who might not know one of the reasons why Alex Lahore signed with Brave Combat Federation, and I think we talk about business decision.
Yeah.
And I think that was amazing when you have an athlete who definitely knows how good he is and his sporting skills and his technical skills, but at the same time to know that, wait, I've been fighting at the welterweight division and middleweight division. I need a weight class that makes a lot of sense for me. And you don't find the super welterweight division in many organizations.
No, well, I don't think any.
And that's exactly one of the reasons why we decided to have those weight classes with super lightweight and super welterweight, because you a lot of people don't talk about it. I mean, you could just brush it down and say that, you know what, we don't need those weight classes. But then the amount of talents that you're actually losing without seeing the best they could be,
Yes.
I think it's insane. When I used to fight, I was fighting at welterweight division. I couldn't go down to lightweight. That was too much of a cut to go down to lightweight. And what you do is, you know that if you don't go down to lightweight, you're fighting at welterweight and you're small at welterweight. You're not as big as you should be at welterweight. So what you do as an athlete is you try to get much more bigger and you walk around at 205 or something of that.
And how beneficial is that to you in terms of developing your skill set, your speed?
Absolutely, and that's the thing. And then you start cutting from there so that you could be much more bigger, and you compensate the size so you're working more on getting bigger before that, so you can not be so small for your weight class. And like you said, I don't think that's very healthy in terms of how much you can grow as an athlete. You're just trying to find a way to fight in a weight class and not have a disadvantage, you know?
Yeah.
And I think if we had super lightweight at that time, I would really, really love to have fought in the super lightweight division, because that would have been the perfect division to be in. And I think today with Brave, we have super lightweight and super welterweight. And for Alex Lahore to know that, okay, my decision is going to be based on the technical side to make sure that I fight in the best weight class I can fight. And I want to make sure that the next step or the next journey of my career, or where I want to be at the top and end my career at the top, is going to be in the weight class that's best for me. And I think that was very interesting to realize that his decision was made on that technical side, and the second one was a business side of where he knows that what Brave is doing in Africa, and coming out of an African event, he wants to take that momentum and fight in this and take the fight that he's taking actually. And I think that's very brave to take a fight against Marcin Bendel in your debut.
But what a interesting matchup, like in terms of statistics. I mean, I wrote some down before this, just because when you look at it, it's crazy. So Lahore's got 33 fights, Marcin Bendel 31.
Yeah.
Lahore has 18 wins by finish, and Marcin Bandel has 20 wins by finish. One's got Lahore's 10 losses and Marcin's 8 losses. So their records are almost identical.
Yeah.
It's mad.
The amount of experience that you're seeing in that numbers that you're mentioning, I think
Well, that's 64 fights between them.
that's crazy. Yeah, I think that's really, you're looking at two top experienced guys in every way. I mean, you're just we're looking at the numbers, and that's a mountain of fights that's there. But then you're looking at two guys that have experience finishing fights. So you look at the experience of how you finish the fights. You mentioned 18 fights, 18 finishes
For Lahore, yeah.
for Lahore, and 20 for Marcin Bandel, out of which 19 are
19 are
submissions.
17 in the first round.
Those are some stupid
Serious
numbers.
And I think 7 of them are heel hooks.
Okay. You don't want to give that guy your leg.
But Lahore has never been submitted.
And that's what makes this fight, for me, very interesting, because when you have a BJJ black belt like Marcin Bandel, with a track record of that many submission wins and that many finishes, one thing, you're looking at this fight and you're looking at the stats and you're saying that this fight is not going to go to the distance, because these are two finishers. It's a finisher was a finisher, and it's insane when you look at the percentage of their finishes. It's insane to see that fight will go to the distance. But then it's the way the finishes are. I mean, I'm not saying that Alex Lahore did not finish fights with submissions, but the amount of knockouts that he has in his record and the amount of submission Marcin Bandel has in his record, and then you're looking at Alex Lahore, who's never been submitted. I think that makes this main event, for me, very interesting, because it's just one of those fights that you want to sit and see this top two quality guys with all that experience put it out there. And I don't know if it's going to go the way I think that it's going to go, and you're going to get a finish. But even if you don't get a finish, I think it's going to be a fight that you could actually take a book and a diary and actually learn,
100%.
How
100%.
for the young generation to watch a fight and learn
it's not
from
one to
something.
be missed by any means. It's interesting as well, because for the first fight for Lahore to come in, he's fighting the guy that's just lost the belt.
Absolutely.
So your debut in the promotion is against the contender that's just lost his belt.
And that's the thing I'm saying. Like, it is a massive statement
Huge.
for Alex to come in, and you're looking at he's not here to get into Brave, get those fights, and make a name for himself. Try to see if he can fight in Africa. No, he's going out for the top guys in the division. He's entering the organization and saying that, give me the top guys, and I'm going to go out there. My first fight is going to be against an actual title contender currently, a former champion.
Yeah.
And that is a massive statement.
Well, did you see his video? The video he did when he signed for Brave. He was digging the grave and saying that's where he's going to put all his opponents. Have you seen
Really?
it?
No,
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
It's worth checking out. He's coming in hot.
He's definitely a charismatic character for sure.
Yeah.
No doubt about that.
And when we speak about France, one of the major motivations, not only was it the weight class for joining Brave, the 175 weight class, it was the fact that he's a French fighter, well known in France, but has never fought in France. He's from Paris.
He's never fought in France?
Never ever fought in France. And Brave's presence in France and Africa was another determining factor for him joining Brave. He wants to win. He wants to beat Marcin Bandel. Then he wants to fight for the title in France and take his title to Ivory Coast.
That's crazy to know that with all the fights that he has in his record.
Never in France.
Never in France. He's been champion in 5 different MMA organizations. Yeah. He's held their world titles in 5 different organizations and never fought in France.
No.
So, listen, I would be more than happy to have that event in France and to have Alex in that card. I think it is something really much more than just having a fighter that has a huge fan base and interest. It's just, I think you just made it more
What a story for him.
Yeah, definitely. It's a crazy story. And when you're looking at Marcin Bendel, and that's why I was saying this experience was experience, right? The amount of organizations that these guys have fought in, like you look at all different stats, the amount of organizations that they've fought in, I don't know, it must cover every top organization that you could think of.
Well, also, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Marcin's fought in 7 different countries.
MMA.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Crazy.
it is.
Not many fighters can say that.
Definitely. Yeah, that's where I think Marcin, we've mentioned this about him before as well. As a fighter, you don't see much weaknesses in terms of experience from his side. You know, you're looking at a guy who's knows what his game is best at. He's have the experience of fighting in top organizations around the world, like you said just now, in multiple countries. I think it's a perfect fit for him to be at Brave Combat Federation. I think that it's a fight business. You know that when you are a top grappler, and every time you put your strength and impose that to your opponent, he's done fantastic. But again, there is a weakness when it comes to striking game. And I think that's what we saw in the last fight when he got caught. And that's the fight business ultimately.
Yeah.
You know, you however good you are, however we could break down a fight, there's still that option or that opportunity for you to get one punch, one knee, one kick, and the fight is done, you know, regardless of who you are or what experience you have. See, the main event for me is I would tell all the young generation that's aspiring to be MMA fighters or trying to learn more about fights from watching fights, they have to watch this fight because there's one thing you're looking at top BJJ guy and top striker and top finisher fighting against each other, but then they also have the experience behind it of how to deal with fights. And I think that's something that you could actually sit down and learn from when you're watching these guys, what their mindset is, what they're actually going to do. But again, we mentioned that Alex Lahore has not been submitted, but I don't think you'd ever come across anyone at this quality level where you have 20 finishes, 19 submissions, and 17 first rounds. So that's a very dangerous grappling skill, even for a guy who's never been submitted.
Yeah, it's even more impressive because it's rare you hear about heel hooks in MMA, and he has 7 of them.
Yeah. Yeah, and that thing, so it's not natural. I mean, it's extraordinary, you know?
Yeah, it sure is. So, yeah, it's very interesting. Very interesting. Never been submitted, but going up against a submission machine.
Yeah, and both ways. Yeah, I think you don't want to get caught by Alex Lahore's strikes
Absolutely
as
not.
well.
Absolutely not. I think the striking advantage is quite clear to Lahore, and Bandel is quite clearly got the grappling advantage.
I really am excited to see to hear more from both these guys at the during the fight week. You know, I'm sure that there's so much you could pick their brain from in terms of how they've been preparing for the fight.
I also think there's going to be some content coming from the Killer King.
Oh, yeah.
Lahore. He is one to watch for sure. He's a character. I'm excited.
Talking about signing, talking about stories,
I know where you're going with this.
you can't miss. I've been a big fan of Netherlands sports, right? I mean, my favorite football team when it comes to national teams have always been Netherlands, and a big Tennis Bergkamp fan, and I've been following their football. But at the same time, when it comes to the combat sports, which was my bread and butter, to make a living, even then I used to follow a lot of these Dutch kickboxers. I mean, one of the most motivational content that I used to help me wake up every day at 4 a.m. and go for that run was Raymond Dekkers.
I knew you were going to say Raymond Dekkers.
You know, have you seen his highlights?
Yeah.
Oh, it's something special. You know, I mean, that guy is. You see what fighting was for him, and the damages that he's taken, the surgeries that he's had, the cuts during Muay Thai, and they've actually changed the what Dutch kickboxing or Dutch Muay Thai. You know, it's almost like what they've done in football with total football at the time when people didn't know what that is, and the term came total football with the way the Dutch team was playing football.
Cruyff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now, and you see that same thing happening when it came to kickboxing, Muay Thai world, where we are looking at Dutch kickboxing or Dutch Muay Thai, and you're seeing those guys perform at the highest level. Whether it's think of them. I mean, Raymond Dekkers was, I think, one of those early guys, but then Semi Shields, Remy Bonyaski, Peter Arts.
Peter Arts was going to say, yeah.
There's so many of these guys that came out, and I used to watch all of them. I mean, those were some of the stories and some of these athletes that were top level.
Nowadays, Rico van Hoven.
Absolutely, yeah. And they've always been at the top level, and you can't miss Dutch kickboxers or Muay Thai fighters when it comes to the top level of that particular sport. And at the same time, so for me, when I go and know that we are hosting our first event in Netherlands, keep in mind this is going to be a record-breaking event. This is going to be the 32nd country we're going and being hosted in around the world, actually extending our own record from Mauritius. But at the same time, it's also the record set for an organization hosting the most European countries. I think I'm losing numbers now, but I think this is the 14th country.
I think it is 14th, yeah.
14th country that we're being hosted
so.
in. So you're looking at the Netherlands event. As all our events, we keep breaking our own record. But for me, we're going to Netherlands, and you get this memory of all these top fighters, all these guys that you've been watching from a young age. And it's really inspiring to be able to put on a show there and get the upcoming next talents and the top guys there to showcase their quality to the world. While we're looking at that, what are the chances you get to have a Muay Thai legend signed to Brave Combat Federation on an exclusive deal to do his to take his MMA career forward? And that is almost like too good to be true for me.
It felt it when I came to you with it. I was like, this is perfect. Like, it did.
and you're looking at a Moroccan Belgium fighter. Immediately when you see that Moroccan background, you remember the Badr Haris and those guys who were in Europe making a life out of the fight business, and it's very different from MMA world, right? You go to the traditional martial arts, and it's very different of what they have to go through to be the top of that game. MMA, on another way, it's much more modern in the sense, like you have a lot of managers out there, promotions out there, but to be at the top of a traditional martial arts, you definitely have to go back and look at what their story is. And Yusuf Bughanem, I think, what better athlete to have in Netherlands for Brave Events debut at such a significant event where we're making history in Europe. I think we couldn't have asked for a better athlete to be fighting in that event in Netherlands, when Muay Thai is one of the biggest sports there, and what they have done for Muay Thai.
Yeah.
And it is only from our end something that's honored to get a guy like Yusuf Bughanem to go and do his MMA career in Netherlands with us. Tell me a little bit more about him. I know that there's so much talk about Yusuf Bughanem. I mean, from the fight side, from the life story wise, he is one of those guys that you would want people to look up to. He's not just that guy who's just famous from fighting and what he's achieved, but as an individual as well. He's humble, and he's down
incredibly
to earth.
humble.
Yeah.
Very, very simple, nice man. Yet aptly named the Terminator, because he is terrifying in the Muay Thai world. I cannot even remember the amount of titles he's won. Like, we've got a list, and it's almost a size of A4.
Yeah.
There's so many. But the ones that stand out to me is Lumpini Stadium champion and Rajnaman Stadium. Now, for any of people that know Muay Thai, for a Farang in Thailand, which is a foreigner, to be a Lumpini Stadium champion and a Rajnaman Stadium champion is unheard of. It's
just to
so
fight,
impressive.
just to
Even just to fight there,
Yeah.
but then to be a champion there. He went to Thailand with nothing. he's had a hard life. He came from nothing and went to Thailand with nothing. Wasn't accepted by the Thais, and he's fought his way all the way to become champions, and now is loved in Thailand, respected, and now lives there. So, and that's all through how good he and how much he's succeeded in Muay Thai.
Oh, if there was any story that you want it to become a movie, that's his story, right? It's actually, literally, I mean, it's unbelievable. You're looking at when you mentioned to me and you bought this when we had the discussion about the scouting reports and you were telling me his story. Anyone who gets to know his whole story, you immediately the picture that comes into your mind is that Street Fighter picture
Yeah.
where Ryu is carrying the bag and
Yes, yeah.
walking into
On
the
stick,
sunset.
yeah.
And you get that picture where it's my life is martial arts, my education is martial arts. I'm going to build my life, my career, my knowledge, my education, everything through this thing called martial arts. And that was that image you get. And his story is no different from that. I mean, you're looking at that young age, you lose your parents, and you somehow are lost in what you need to do. But Yusuf, to be able to go and get that breakthrough of a fight that he fought in Netherlands, that got him the opportunity to get paid to fly and take a one-way ticket with his brother at the age of 17 to Thailand, and didn't know if he's ever going to come back or what's next for him. And so I think, if I'm not mistaken, his brother might be 4 years younger to him. So if I'm calculating right, if my math is good, he must have been somewhere around 13-year-old when
Yes, 13, yeah.
a 13-year-old, you're a 17-year-old kid traveling to Thailand by yourself and not sure what's going to happen next, and you have your younger brother with you who's 13-year-old, and you just fast forward and you're seeing today one of the biggest Muay Thai fighters,
Well, his brother also
and,
got on
and
to
his
be
brother becoming a world champion,
multiple-time world champion as well.
and it's unbelievable. I mean, that's the story that is much more than just about how good of an athlete you are, but it's about how you become a father, a guardian for your younger brother. And you ask anyone who's traveled at a young age to Thailand, it's not an easy lifestyle because you don't have the resources to live the way you should be living, but at the same time you're not as comfortable because you're coming from a foreign country. You're not used to living the way some of these fighters in Thailand are used to living, and you're between that somewhere where you're confused of what should I do. And I remember when I was 18, 19, I've traveled to Thailand, and it wasn't. It was in a way one of the greatest experience of my life, and so much that I've learned because of the struggle. And when I think about at the age of 17 and lose your parents and take your younger brother and to be in Thailand, I can not imagine the mindset he had to have to be able to survive there, but at the same time to achieve what he has achieved, to help his brother achieve what he has achieved, to become two superstars in the world. I can't think of any better example of what it is to take struggle, hardship, and turn that into a positive tool for your growth. And this is the example for that.
100%. And now he's starting his MMA journey with Brave Combat Federation,
Absolutely.
bringing all of that with him.
When you have that kind of mentality, no question that nothing is there that's going to stop you. And we've had. If you look at Brave, we've always valued the career that they've had before from the amateur level. You look at us on every event, every breakdown, we always give credit to the amateur MMA upbringing, because that is so important, and we think that is what's going to be the key differentiation between guys who are just fighting pro and the guys who have gone through that ranks. But if you look at the history of Brave, in traditional martial as well, we've had arguably the best BJJ fighter of all time, for sure in his weight class, and Bruno Malfacini, 10-time BJJ world champion. And we've had the likes of maybe arguably one of the greatest Wushu Sanda champion, Mahsen Saifi. But then you also have interesting stories like Sambo as well. I think Ikram Aliskarov,
Vela Murad.
Valimurad and Rodnev. I mean, Ikram Aliskalov is a four-time world champion at the Sambos. And then you have you have all those greatest amateur athletes, one. And then you have some great stories like Mahmoud Sebi. You're looking at stories of coming from the traditional background, wanting to be an Olympian, became an Olympian, transitioned into MMA. Fantastic. And now he's going for tryouts for the U.S. wrestling team.
To be an Olympian again.
Olympian again. And I have not heard of a transition from an Olympian in wrestling, moving into MMA and going back to Olympics. So you have those great stories. It's always been part of Brave when it comes to the best amateur athletes. With Yusuf, it's a mixture of all, right? I mean, that's what makes him something. I don't know how to put that into words, but it's something else where you know that is a star and everything that happens from, because you're talking about that story behind it of what he's achieved, the amateur record of becoming a legend. So again, it's just not that I'm the best jiu-jitsu athlete, and I've achieved X, Y, Z, and that's my record. For me, when I think about his record, the only thing, because I used to follow Muay Thai and I was involved in Muay Thai a lot, and that's why from the top of my head, I know he was a WMC champion, Rajan Lumpini champion, as you mentioned. In Lumpini Stadium, he beat the former Rajan champion, but he was a WBC Muay Thai champion.
Waco champion.
Waco Pro champion, WKN champion. Just thinking out of the head, I mean, but I'm sure that, we have to, at some stage, we will go and run through all the titles that he's won, because every one of them is a real diamond when it comes to his records, when you look at the story in the background,
Yeah.
So every title that we're talking about, and I think we need to really mention every single title that he won. At some, let's find a way to do that, because while I'm talking, it makes more sense that every title that is winning, it's attached to that story of what he's gone through. It makes it so much more bigger of what he's won. Whether it's small title, big organization, small organization, or the biggest that he's fought, every win is goes back to attaching to that story of how he's achieved that. And you cannot just mention his achievements as an athlete without telling the story and the background that he's gone through. And I think that's what makes him really special. And I think it makes it even more greater for us to have an athlete like Yusuf. And I think it's a fantastic signing for Brave to tell a story of a fighter. And if you want to tell, like our organization trying to go around the world, tell the stories of people from different parts of the world and what they've done, what better honor than having to tell Yusuf Bughanim's story? And I'm really looking forward to having him fight this fight and see him, how he's gonna do in an MMA cage. And that's another world altogether. To be there, I think he had over 164 wins, around 164.
I think 168 wins, 120 knockouts.
120 knockouts, yeah. So 120 knockouts is more than a lot of people can actually think of.
This is not a Thai guy either. This is a foreigner.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
exactly. That's the interesting part, right? People who have been there as a foreigner in Thailand, that somewhere the aura is there around that people want you to fail because you're a foreigner. They don't want you to do really good in Muay Thai, So it's always going to be there because it is your sport. You want to be the best at your sport. You don't want a foreigner to come and be the best at your sport. But to be there and to achieve that at that stage, it just, that's what I was saying. Like in Thailand, being a foreigner, trying to be the best with a brother with him, being the guardian of it at that young age. It's just crazy.
Well, now, interesting enough, he brings his son to every fight. He doesn't miss a fight. He comes to every single one. He'll be in his corner in the Netherlands.
You better do that. I mean, who else would you want that boy to look up to, right? I mean,
know.
If he can see this story and as much as he could see, and now we're looking at transitioning to MMA. I mean, we've said that before. Sometimes you're at the top of your game and you don't see a lot of Muay Thai guys, kickboxing guys, at the top of the game. ever thinking, should I transition? And we've seen MMA guys transitioning into fighting in boxing or other sports a little
Yeah.
bit here and there, but you don't really see top level
Muay
combat
Thai
sports
guys,
athletes wanting to come to MMA because it doesn't really make sense. But to have that challenge, it speaks volume of what his mentality is. We spoke about his mentality from his lifestyle, what he's achieved. I think it cannot be spoken more about. I think it's unbelievable how good that story is and how big of an inspiration he is for everybody else, for the fighters, for the young generation. So I think to be in MMA now, I won't lie, it is not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy to come into Brave Combat Federation at a lightweight division and be in the mix of those killers at that division, So it's not going to be easy. But one thing he said that really caught me was when he mentioned that I'm training MMA and I have a great team that helps me suffer.
Yes, he did say that.
That helps me suffer, so I could learn more about myself. And I was like, that's everything in a nutshell. His philosophy, his principle is very clear, that he thrived in that struggle, he thrived in that suffering, that he took that and made it into his biggest weapon to help him grow, to help him take care of his family, and to achieve all what he's achieved in his life. And that's literally has been his education, is that suffering and that struggles in his life. So when he said that I got a team who's helping me suffer, I was like, you know what? When
Quite profound, isn't it?
Yeah, and when you have that mentality, we're gonna sit and say that MMA is gonna be difficult. Of course, it's gonna be difficult. I want that. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm asking you for it. You're not gonna give me something and it's like, hey, hold on, it's gonna be difficult. He's like, no, that's exactly the reason I'm coming for it. I want that. That's the only thing that I'm interested in is the suffering and the struggle and the difficulty that it's gonna bring.
It's crazy.
Another different level of mentality, So doing his pro debut in Brave in Netherlands, where he's gone for his fight that changed his life, to get that first amount that would help him travel, take him and his brother and travel to Thailand, coming back there and take that new journey, where he's going to take a journey of building a bigger, stronger legacy of being in mixed martial art, and tell that story of his story to the world through Brave Combat Federation. I'm happy to write that story, and I'm happy that it's happening in Netherlands and it's fighting in Netherlands, and we could make that fight happen. I think a lot of people are going to be excited to be able to see him fight mixed martial art in Netherlands.
I can't wait.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, big stories, big experience, big fighters in this card, right? So I know that sometimes when you have the fight like Alex Lahore and Marcin Bendel, we're talking about all this experience, knockouts, the numbers, the promotions, all that stuff. And then you have the signing of Yusuf Bughanim and doing his debut. Sometimes you get overshadowed in this mix, It's not difficult to be overshadowed by these big names.
Yeah.
But tell me about the co-main event.
So I'm really intrigued by this. We've got Noah Blyden versus Adrian Grelak. Noah Blyden's, I personally think, could potentially be a superstar in the making. He's a bit of a TV personality, very big on social media. It's almost got very sort of similar vibes to Urko Yun. They're actually friends. I know they train together, but they do the videos on Instagram together. He's got the potential to sort of follow in Urko's footsteps. Not only that, he is a killer in his own right. He's 16-0 in kickboxing. Very new to MMA, 3-1. But he's. We talk about mindset. He's a guy that's come from 16-0 in kickboxing, and on his pro debut took on a guy that was 15-1.
Wow.
That then went on to become a champion in a different promotion. So talk about mindset. You're going into a new sport and fighting as a debutant and fighting a guy at 15-1.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. So that's his blemish on his record. But for me, I was more impressed that he took that fight. It didn't matter too much that he lost it. Of course he's going to lose it. It's 15-1 against 0-0. So I was more impressed by his mindset going into that. But since then, he's 3 fights, 3 finishes all in the first round, 2 knockouts, 1 submission. He's a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, and which I didn't know until I looked it up, and I was quite impressed. You know, he's the real deal. Let's see what he's brings to this fight. However, he's fighting a tough guy with double the experience he's got, 6-2. Also a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, and a Polish grappling champion. So it is striker versus grappler, I think. But on paper it looks like this. But if you delve a little bit deeper, Gralak in his own right is 50% of his wins are by knockout. So it's quite an intriguing matchup. They're although he's got double the experience, Adrian, I think they stack up quite well. One's got a taekwondo background, one's got a karate background, one's got more experience in grappling, whereas one's got a lot more experience in kickboxing. Yet they've both got finishes in both. It's interesting, but I'm particularly interested to see how Noah Blyden does in the Netherlands as a potential Dutch superstar.
Absolutely, and I think, like you said, he's one of those guys that's a complete package, right? And he's the interest from the fans for this co-main event fight, right? I mean, where do you think that comes from Noah? Is it from how good he's on social media?
Yeah,
with his friends like Urko, and you see that kind of charismatic character that is connecting with the youth and the next generation and the people that's out there on the social platform. But at the same time, all is from his K1 professional fight career.
I think it's a combination of both. He's clearly the real deal in kickboxing, and he has got the attention of the youth. So I'm really interested to see how he gets on.
No, it's good. I think to have him at the co-main event, but against Polish grappling champion, I think that's going to be a good main event and co-main event for Polish jiu-jitsu and grappling.
Of course,
world, right?
yeah, of course.
I mean, there's going to be a lot of eyeballs from the Poland fans to see how they do, but at the same time, it's against 2 top-level strikers that their opponents are. And I think so. Yeah,
one of the reasons Gralak wanted to come to Brave was Marcin Bandel.
Okay.
And him being the champion of a Polish world champion.
Yeah, I didn't realize when we put up this matchup how important this fight card is going to be for Poland. That's an interesting one. But with that being said, I think you see that this has everything, this fight card. But I do feel like we said, you have the local heroes fighting. You have a story for that momentum of the bantamweight, a big story of what's next for bantamweight is happening. You have the signing of Yusuf Buranam, a massive signing for us. And then you have the main event where you have 2 of the top most experienced guys and crazy stats that if you would have told that to someone, they wouldn't really believe it unless they actually see it. And now they actually get to see it on 25th of May. So with all this, I think there's one fight that I look back and I'm like, it might be the dark horse of this card, and somewhere is that spark that I'm like, you know what, all this is great. There's so much hype behind all these fights and so much stories behind them, but I'm looking at Pedro and Isaev, and I'm like, man, that's a fight I don't want people to miss out not knowing about it.
Particularly if you saw Nosso Pedro's last fight in Brave. Fighting against a similar opponent.
I think a similar opponent, and in a lot of ways, right? I mean, he was at a similar age group. I mean, we're talking about at their peak, at their prime. But at the same time, you're talking about Albert Duraev's brother.
Yeah.
And that was a big debut for him to fight against Pedro. And I think it was in Bahrain.
It was.
It was in Bahrain.
Brave 79.
Yeah. So, yeah, I remember that because of how much of attention we were getting for Albert Duraev's brother, Dohar Duraev, and when he entered, I mean, that was one of those fights that everybody looked and said that this is going to be one of those guys who is Chechen in origin from Europe coming in and going to have his wrestling pedigree and come out wrestle with the experience of a brother like Albert Duraev, who knows A to Z about fighting at the top level of
And was
mixed
in his
martial arts.
corner that night.
Who was that?
Andy was in his corner that
Oh
night.
yeah, he was in his corner that night. Yeah,
Yeah.
and when you're training with that kind of experience around you, it's just makes everybody think that's that. You know, you're gonna have an easy win. But the way Pedro comes in and upsets everybody, I think, and also a sad similarity is also because that event happened in Bahrain. Nobody really realized how big of an upset that was.
No.
If you think about it, right?
Yeah.
Like going back to that now, I think this is almost the same situation right now. We see the similarities. That's just so much media focused athletes in that card where he's fighting. So I think it would be a shame if we don't address Pedro and his last fight in Bahrain against Doha and how he's put on a performance that should be one of the biggest upsets for a debutant, you know. So when you have the debut, when you look at the cards and you're looking at Albert Drive's brother Doha and you have looking at Pedro's debut in Brave, the odds would be against you. And I think, I don't know how it looks this time, but it's a very similar position when you're fighting a Chechenian background fighter from Austria.
Also undefeated, like Juraev was.
Yes, and I think that's one of the interesting things about Pedro. I mean, when you look at his way of dealing with his fight career, he's one of those guys that you look and you're like, hold on, you know, you somehow need to focus a little bit more to understand that is a real fighter, because the fights that he's taken, the amount of undefeated guys that he's fought is one thing, but the amount of the quality of fighters that he's been fighting and the fights that he's been taking, I mean, that's a fearless fighter. I mean, it would be a very good dream for any athlete relation departments to have, or matchmakers to have, a fighter who doesn't care about who they fight. They would fight anybody, you know. So you look at the record as well, and you look at who he's fought, whether the experience of the fighters that he's fought, whether it's the amount of times that he's fought, you'll notice that you're actually looking at a fighter who hasn't really focused on the business side of his career and focused more on the sports side.
Yeah.
We're looking at that difference, you know, like, bring me anyone. When do you want me to fight? And I'm going to fight. So you're fighting another undefeated athlete. You're in your home country, and you're taking a fight against an undefeated Chechen Austrian fighter, you know, and a lot of people would think twice to do that, but he's taken that kind of fight in their friendly countries and created an upset and come back, you know. So there should be a credit given to Pedro for his fight career, and I think that's going to be that is a fight in this card that I hope is not ignored with the sound and the noise and everything else that comes in with this massive, massive group of fighters and fights that's in this card. It's going to be interesting to see, because you're looking at not just a random wrestler, right? I mean, if you're looking at Isaev as well, the fight is not against a guy who's coming from Eastern Europe, where you're looking at and saying that, okay, there's going to be wrestling and grappling. No, he's fought 4 fights and finished his 4 fights. I think that's what makes this fight even more interesting.
They were due to fight before, I believe, but the fight got cancelled.
Now, this is the story that's been spreading around a little bit, because I've heard that Isaev mentioning that he was surprised. He felt that Pedro is never going to take this fight,
Yeah.
because Pedro never wanted to fight him. This was booked because in a previous organization, in one of the regional organizations. I think I don't know if it's the one where Pedro was a champion in one of the organizations, but he was not willing to take that fight, and as far as the statement, the quote from Isaev, he declined the fight. So he was surprised why he took that fight. So that's what's the story that's going around. I don't know what's the real story behind it. So, but this was something that is spreading. But at the same time, Isaev also adds to a statement and says that he is actually going to knock him out. I mean, that's his goal, is not to go out there and just...
I'll be very impressed if he does. Nasser Pedro is tough.
Yeah.
He's real tough.
Yeah, and that's one of its attributes, right? I mean, Isaev knows that there is a guy who has good grappling, who has finished a few of his fights to submissions for sure. At the same time, toughness, his strength, and where he feels like, yes, I'm going to be faster than him, and I'm going to not give that opportunity for his strength and his submissions to outplay me, and I'm going to finish that fight. But yeah, history speaks otherwise in terms of Pedro's career. So when he's taken any kinds of fighters in front of him and changed the story of that card. So yeah, that's for me the dark horse, for sure in that card. So yeah, listen.
Potentially fight of the night, that one.
You think which one?
The Pedro Isaju.
Really?
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah,
Based on Pedro's last performance, it was great.
True. But that's the story. I mean, if you're looking at the fight, I mean, when you have strikers like Yusuf Bagan, I mean, you're going to see some very explosive stand-up fights there,
Yes.
You have that, and then at the same time...
That could also end quite quickly.
Quickly, yeah.
Whereas this one could be a barn burner.
True. But I think most of those fights on those cards are guys who have good finish records, and the main event is leading in that part where it you can't think of anything other than a finish happening in that in that fight. But if it doesn't, for me, if that fight doesn't end in a finish, for me that's going to be the fight of the night. The main event is going to be the fight of the night because there was a reason that two of these guys who had 45 fights in total must have had, oh God knows what, 30, 39 finishes in total. If those two guys fight against each other and the fight was not finished, ends in a finish, I think it's a win-win for you. You're either seeing a fantastic finish, a submission clinic, or a crazy knockout. But if you don't see it, you're going to see some amazing mixed martial art tactical course,
I don't disagree.
Now, let's see. We spoke about Shorty and Kosi. We've covered that off the line, and I'm excited for Brave 83. I'm excited to go to Netherlands as well. But if not, we'll try and see if we can do a watch along together.
Sounds good.
Yeah. All right.